I am Jonathan New, IMN's Executive Director, and I am joined today by two of our IMN staff, Crystal Wells and Ellen Gowdy. And we've got some others here who are IMN faculty members and board members or former board members. And some of you are well acquainted with IMN, and some of you are getting more and more acquainted with it. And whoever you are and however you're arriving this day in terms of your relationship with IMN, we so welcome you here. We're so grateful for the time you're giving us to share with you our excitement about Fundamentals of Transitional Leadership, the new curriculum that IMN is launching. So I've got a few things that I want to share with you by use of some slides, and I'll also, however, be making sure that we have time to answer questions that you have. I'll pause along the way and give you an opportunity when you have a question to go ahead and raise your hand using the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screens. That'll alert me to the fact that you got a question, you want me to explain some things. So we're so grateful that you were here. So I want to start out with a couple of basic things about what Fundamentals of Transitional Leadership is as a course of study. And I think one of the most important things to say about it is this is a course of study that is by practitioners for practitioners. You know, there are all kinds of trainings that you might take, and yet this is the kind of training that is designed specifically to improve your transitional leader practice. And it's being delivered by people who know that practice exceptionally well because they're doing it themselves. We are transitional leaders who have served and are serving in a number of different roles currently or in our past, and we are bringing our knowledge and our experience to bear on that work. Specifically, this is a training that replaces and enhances and expands on IMN's former curriculum, the Fundamentals of Transitional Ministry, or FTM curriculum, that had two parts to it: the work of the leader and the work of the congregation. So the work of the leader training, which was the first part of that training, is no longer being offered by IMN. And we have one last work of the congregation course that is going to be offered in June of this year. But after that, no more of those trainings will be offered. So I do want to say that there are some things about this new curriculum that are going to sound very familiar. And so let me name those things so we make sure we understand what we're talking about here. The FTL's main purpose is, as a course of study, is directly tied to IMN's core mission. That is to equip transitional leader practitioners to help them manage change for healthy transitions and faithful transformations. It reflects a key principle that IMN has long held, which is the moment of change offers a unique opportunity for us to do a kind of work that otherwise can't be done with a congregation. So addressing organizational issues, or making adaptive change, or helping a congregation meet discerned goals, or deepen resilience. So a number of different things that we might be able to do. And of course, it relies on change and transition and systems theories to help practitioners frame the work that we do of managing change. It also provides participants with a wide range of analytical and discernment techniques, approaches for setting a climate of change and mobilizing the congregation to do that work, and skills for dealing with naturally occurring change dynamics, such as conflict, which often arises. So I'm sure for those of you who know and understand transitional leadership, that all sounds very, very familiar to you. I don't think I've said anything that departs that far from what we did when we were offering our Fundamentals of Transitional Ministry training. So the question then becomes, where Fundamentals of Transitional Leadership, this new curriculum, where does it begin to part ways with our former curriculum? So to answer that question, I want to move over to some slides that I want to share with you. So the main thing I want to name here is we've got an awareness in this new curriculum of some key shifts in the landscape of congregational life and faith-based leadership. And I just want to name those kind of quickly. We have changing patterns of post-pandemic congregational life. You all understand this. You're seeing this directly in the work that you do. What we're doing, however, is recognizing that we're living with the fact that congregational life is substantially different even than it was just a few years ago. We've got changing patterns of participation and membership that have been exacerbated through the experience of the pandemic. We've got increasing pace and magnitude of change that congregations are experiencing, and we've also got a higher percentage of lower capacity congregations. So along with this is the fact that we've got a number of consequential, even what I would consider existential changes that congregations are facing, including a greater need to reconsider their facilities, to explore shared ministry or the possibility of amalgamation, and to engage perhaps in discernment about the possibility of disbanding or closure. So these factors and more are having a direct impact on congregations. And some of the things that we're seeing in congregations now are increasing organizational anxiety, a higher level of divisiveness within congregations, and a higher level of conflict within them as well. Things are heating up in the lives of congregations. And so this curriculum part is going to respond to that fact. There's also the fact that there have been some significant shifts in how denominations are relying on transitional leadership for congregations, with an ever-expanding array of transitional leadership roles and delivery methods that have occurred. I'll say a little bit more about this as I go along. IMN has long trained intentional interim ministers, but intentional interim ministry is not the only thing that those of us who are trained in transitional leadership are doing with that training and with that experience. Increasingly, we're called to address a wider range of challenges that congregations are facing. So we can talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but the point here is that we're responding to the fact that we've seen those kinds of shifts. Also, our practitioners, those who are our learners, have some other thoughts in mind. They have a larger set of vocational goals that are tied to the fact that we're doing transitional leadership through a number of different roles and delivery methods and approaches. So that's a fact. And the other fact is they are trying to fit this training into the rest of their very busy lives. IMN's former training, FTM, has always been delivered in an intensive way. And this curriculum responds to the need of learners to be able to fit their training more into the rest of their lives. And we're going to say a lot more about this in a moment. So the main thing here that I would point out then is this shift has created a situation where we've made some specific change to IMN's core transitional leader course of study. Those changes are changes in content, changes in approach, and changes in structure as well. So here are a few things to keep in mind when you're thinking about key differences between the former FTM curriculum and the fundamentals of transitional leadership, the FTL course of study. And just so you know, there are a number of things I'm going to say here, and then we'll pause and I'll take some questions that you might have. The first and really important piece of this is that this curriculum is being contextually responsive. It responds to a number of those things that I named previously in the previous slide, and more. We've considered the realities that congregations are facing, and we have been striving to make sure that we're responding to those as much as possible. This is also an outcomes-based curriculum. It's driven by the clarity that we have created about a number of intended outcomes that we want our learners to have, things that we intend them to have in place as they walk away from this training, things that have to do with what they know, what they're able to do, but also how they can best express this work through some key postures. And I'm going to say a few more things about posture coming up in a moment. But we believe that it is equally important to how we bring ourselves to the work as it is what we do when we arrive. So I'll say a little bit more about that. But we have about 40 outcomes that we have been able to identify as key outcomes, and happy to share more about that in a little bit. I also specifically wanted to name the fact that we've got adult learning, an adult learning centered curriculum here. We want each participant to be able to build on their knowledge and experience and abilities. And so we are making more use of things like participant setting descriptions and integrative learning experiences to help them to reflect on and to deepen their practice as well. We have a much higher emphasis on the leader self-awareness and emotional intelligence. I mentioned posture before, so a strong posture emphasis. The person of the leader and practitioner self-awareness has increased emphasis in this new curriculum. With that recognition, as I said before, that how we show up is at least as important as what we do when we do show up, particularly in these days when there aren't easy answers. How we bring ourselves to, how we embody the work of transitional leaders is of more importance than ever. So one of the things we're doing along with this is we're focusing on emotional intelligence. We're tending to leadership posture in one specific way through a new emphasis on the importance of emotional intelligence in leadership, including the EQ interpretive framework that we're introducing with our learners, the use of the emotional and social competency inventory, and one-on-one coaching sessions with EQ trainers to help interpret what the ESCI, the emotional and social competency inventory, might help them learn about themselves and their practice of leadership. So I'll share more about EQ and the ESCI later on if we have time at the end and if you are interested. But trying to give you a bit more of a flavor for how we're emphasizing posture in this curriculum in some new ways and some specific things we intend to do in order to do that. We have also redesigned this curriculum so that it is in line with online best practices. Most of you will know that during COVID, we took what was always an in-person intensive training and we put it into the online format. And when we did that, we did that as quickly as we could because we wanted to make sure that training was still available to our learners. But we also recognize that in this revision, we need to start with those online best practices first and build the training in a way that it fit those best practices. So we have done that. One of the specific things that we have done in addition is to create a curriculum that has a completely modular design. So I mentioned before that previous FTM, Fundamentals of Transitional Ministry curriculum, that essentially had two parts, Fundamentals of Transitional Ministry, the work of the leader, and then the second part, the work of the congregation, with some field work added to that as well to complete the full core training. What we have moved to is a modular training that takes about the same number of contact hours that was represented over those two courses, and instead is broken into 5 modules. So we're talking about smaller 12 to 15 hour modular trainings delivered in shorter class sessions as well, 3-hour sessions for the most part, spread out over 2 to 6 week periods. So, the amount of time that they're spread out over depends on what the training actually is. So I'm going to speak about this in a lot more detail in a bit when we talk more about the various levels involved in this fundamentals of transitional leadership training, and when we also talk about specific modules. But modular design is a key piece here. And the final thing I would just name here is that this curriculum is much more vocationally aware. We have a wider embrace in this curriculum of those around who the transitional leaders are who we are training. So to be clear, we are firmly committed to continue to offer the best possible training for intentional interim ministry. We're going to still be doing that through this fundamentals of transitional leadership training. And we also know that some transitional leaders are wanting to serve in different ways. For example, as general transition specialists or as congregational consultants or coaches, not just around the change in clergy leader moment, but also around other key moments of change that congregations are facing. We've got settled faith community leaders who just want to be a lot better at managing the change that they're experiencing with their congregations. And we also have dreamers and visionaries that are showing up for our trainings, arriving, wanting to engage their people, the people that they know in their own faith communities, and exploring new forms of being congregations and new ways of being congregations. They want to be change agents, encouraging fundamental adaptive changes with the congregations where they serve. So fundamentals of transitional leadership as a course of study is going to help us meet all of those goals in a much better way. We're going to continue to serve those who are new to transitional leadership, and we're also going to better serve those who are experienced transitional leaders who are looking to learn more, looking to deepen their skills, and looking to develop a specialty as well. So I want to pause right there. I have said so many things, shared so much with you, and I wonder if there are any particular comments or questions that any of you might have at this moment before I move on to the next piece that I want to share, which are those fundamentals of transitional leadership levels and the modules that make up those levels. Any questions at this point? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions at this point, so I will press on. So
Jonathan, Lynn raised his hand.
I'm sorry?
Lynn Carmen had his hand up.
Lynn did?
I had my hand up, yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry, Lynn.
That's okay. That's okay.
Go ahead and ask.
You may have gotten to somewhat of an answer to the question that was occurring to me, recognizing that none of us sees into the future extremely well or extremely accurately. I'm struck by, I'm just wondering, so we talk about the course being responsive to situations, contextually responsive, situationally responsive. And when you talked about the dreamers, maybe you answered this, but how are we, is the curriculum able at all to try to get out in front of things rather than to just to help congregations to get out in front, to help ministries to get out in front rather than just respond or react?
Oh, that's such a great question, Lynn. And maybe it would have been better for me to have said the context is dramatic, significant change, and change needed, adaptive change specifically needed. So, it's not the case. It's not the case that we are only managing the specific change of clergy leaders within a system. That may be happening if we are in the role of intentional interim minister, serving in that moment of pastoral vacancy and managing that specific change will be important. And increasingly, those of us who are doing this work report the many significant other changes that are happening in the lives of congregations that we're needing to manage simultaneously to the degree that we can. And underneath all of that is the really, really deep change that congregations are experiencing, which is expressed in some of those deep existential moments they're facing around how do we continue to be sustainable? How do we continue to be responsive to the needs and wants and interests of those who may or may not be members of our congregation, who may or may not attend and be a part of our faith community? So we've got a number of levels to the change that are happening, and underneath all of it, Lynn, is the need to address adaptive change at a really fundamental level that requires behavioral shifts, deepened discernment, and plan making for how we step faithfully out into our next chapter. And so this is not a training where we're going to say, for example, people's membership in churches means something different than it used to. We might name that, but we're not going to say, now we're going to teach you how to manage that. What we're going to do is we're going to help every transitional leader who we're training apply these deep transitional leader principles and postures and practices in a way that helps the congregations they serve meet the range of challenges that they're experiencing. So I see this very much as a curriculum that is primarily responsive to the fact that our congregations are at a moment where significant adaptive change is required, and we need to capacitize more leaders of different kinds, whether those are clergy leaders or lay leaders, to help their congregations make that kind of change, make those specific transitions and transformations that are faithful. Is that helpful, Lynn? Did I address your question?
Yeah, I think in part, I think what I'm hearing you say is the hope is to build capacity in people to anticipate change is going to keep happening.
Yes,
change happens. And so how will we build resilience and creativity and whatever in order to even anticipate what may happen?
Absolutely. One of the, we have focused so much in our training, especially in the early days of IMN, specifically on how we manage that between clergy leader change, that a change of pastors, which is a significant moment in the lives of congregations. And we're recognizing that there are other significant moments in the lives of congregations as well, significant moments of change. And we're living in a time of those significant changes. We feel them palpably. And so this training is going to be, over the years, we've tried to be more and more responsive to that fact. This training is going to help us do that in the most robust way possible to help us all be in a place where we can address the deep change that's going on in the most healthy way, in a way that does help congregations build resilience, because more and more change is going to come along, right? So that's certainly one of the goals of the training, one of the outcomes we hope for when transitional leaders are working with congregations in the midst of change. Great. Thank you for that really excellent question. I want to return to some of the details of what this modular curriculum looks like, what the course of study looks like, and specifically some of the levels that we name within the FTL. So we have a first level that we're calling FTL Essentials. This is a series of modules 1 to 3, and I'm going to talk about those in a moment. They are 12-hour each trainings, and these are going to provide a really good foundation for transitional leadership. Just to be really clear, here, this is not the equivalent of the prior FTM curriculum that IMN offers. It's not equivalent to that core training. It's a subset of it. So we think this series is going to be really a good foundation for transitional leadership. We're also going to encourage people to move on to another level, which I'll talk about in a minute. But this FTL Essentials level, Module 1 to 3 series, this is really appropriate for anyone who hasn't taken any transitional leadership training previously. We also believe it's very appropriate for anyone who has transitional leader training, but it's been 5 or more years. And it's time for a refresher and time to reframe some of the work that we do. Importantly, modules 1 to 3 need to be taken in sequence in order to complete level 1. You can't take module 2 before you've taken module 1. That's not true of some other modules, and I want to say that right up front. Also, each of these modules is 4 sessions, 3 hours each, spread out over 2 to 4 week periods, depending. And it's our intention to offer this 3 module series several times during the year. So there'll be multiple opportunities for people to move through this series of module 1 to 3 throughout the year. Importantly, attendance at an orientation session is required before registering for module 1. That's a change for us, and I'll talk about why we're making this change. But an orientation is required before registering for module 1. If you go to the IMN's website and look at the FTL web page, you'll see information about orientation sessions and signups for those orientation sessions. We've been running them for the past 2 weeks, and they proved to be really, really important in terms of helping prepare our learners for what to expect in that module 1 course, especially, which I want to tell you about a little bit more. So module 1 is an invitation to transitional leadership. We call it Thresholds. It's going to introduce some key principles and theories and practices, but also some core postures and professional standards as well. We're going to use, as I said earlier, the emotional intelligence framework, the emotional and social competency inventory specifically, and one-on-one EQ coaching to help leaders deepen their practice and their understanding of themselves. And again, I'm going to say more about EQ and the SE later on because there's more detail on that that's important. We're going to continue to do some things in this training that we did previously. IMN continues to use Congregation's 5 focus points and the leader's 5 process tasks. Those are woven throughout this module and every other module in the FTL core training, levels 1 and 2. In addition to that, our understanding about these core principles has evolved over time, and we have refined those understandings. And so it's important to know, while there's continuity around the 5 focus points and 5 process tasks, we also have, we've rethought those a bit in terms of the current context. So as we move on from module 1, module 2 moves to what we're calling the art and science of transitional leadership. This really is, as a follow-up to module 1, a focus on the use of analytical tools and techniques to explore some things that are really critical to this work, such as power dynamics and organizational identity and culture, the community context, and how we set the stage for leading change. So some specific things such as cultivating a climate of change and identifying what the adaptive work there is to do here. So if you think of this movement from Module 1 to Module 2, we've got more of a focus on how we move from theory to practice and the change management process per se. We do that, and we're going to be doing that through a number of things, but some things such as communications approaches that we use. And let's see, I'll just move on to talking a little bit about Module 3. Module 3 then completes Level 1 FTL Essentials, leading the organization during transitions. It's building on 1 and 2. It's going to highlight how we work with others specifically to manage transitions, including organizational discernment and organizing and mobilizing for managing change, and a deeper exploration of things like norms and lifeways and cultural shifts, and some specific things such as how trauma impacts transitions as well. I wonder if there are any questions about this first level before I move on to talking about second level and some of the modules involved in it. Any questions about Level 1 Essentials? All right, I'm gonna move on. So as we move beyond the FTL Essentials level, it is possible to complete what we call the Fundamentals of Transitional Leadership core by adding a couple of other modules. So you've taken modules 1 through 3 in sequence, and then you can add 2 additional modules, each of which are 15 hours apiece. Adding those to Level 1, that is what we believe provides you with an excellent foundation for transitional leadership. That's what we believe will give you full confidence in your ability to serve in a transitional leader role. And specifically, this is what we consider to be equivalent, roughly equivalent, with the former FTL, FTMC course of study that we previously had. In addition to that, modules 4 and 5, which I'll talk about in a moment, are also really good choices for those of you who are experienced transitional leaders who have taken FTL training and you're looking for a refresher, or you're looking for general continuing education as well. You want to move on to do those things. These modules, I kind of said this before, but I'll say it again, modules 4 and 5, these modules can be taken in any order, and they're also modules that can be taken with or without the module 1 to 3 sequence. So you don't have to have any prior training in order to take these 2 specific modules. These modules at 15 hours each consist of 5 to 6 sessions that are mostly 3 hours, but maybe 2 to 3 hours, depending on the training. And those are spread out over a 3 to 6 week period, depending. We also intend for these modules to be offered each 2 to 3 times a year. So you'll get a couple of opportunities to do these, to engage in learning around these modules. And the specific modules are Module 4, Emotional Intelligence and Group Dynamics. This is training with a focus on deepening the leader's understanding of themselves as a person and relation to others in the context of transitional leadership. This is training that's going to weave together group dynamics, concepts, and techniques, and the emotional intelligence aspects that undergird them. It also is going to use the emotional and social competency inventory and a one-on-one coaching session with an EQ trainer to help leaders deepen their practice and understanding of self. If you've taken that module 1 already, you won't have to repeat doing that. What we're going to do in this module, however, is go deeper and deeper and deeper with that work. This is a training that is being designed primarily by Kimberly Sechrist Ashby, who is an emotional intelligence and human relations EQHR Center trainer, who has come to us following the conclusion of the EQHR Center's life as a not-for-profit organization. IMN became the legacy beneficiary of the EQHR Center's trainings, but really mostly, more important, the relationships with the EQ trainers. So we are drawing off the gifts and graces of EQ trainers and their awareness and some of those trainings to help integrate this kind of learning into the FTL curriculum, and specifically in Module 1 and in this training that uses group dynamics as a way to move more deeply into our understanding, our self-understanding as leaders. And the second module here in this level is Module 5, conflict transformation. Here we're going to address conflict in the earlier modules, but this is again going much deeper with in terms of conflict. This is designed specifically to help transitional leaders grow in their ability to address and lead their congregations, faith communities, through the conflict that they are experiencing. Also as a way to guide these systems towards healthy engagement around the differences they're experiencing. This module is being primarily designed by Teresa Cooley, one of our IMN staff faculty, who is the author of Transforming Conflict, The Blessings of Congregational Turmoil. So we're going to draw off the specific experience, knowledge, and learning that Teresa has to share with us in this as well. So I've said a number of things about level 2, and I wonder if, and those modules within it, I wonder if there are any questions about level 2 and either the conflict transformation or the emotional intelligence and group dynamics modules. Any questions at this point? All right, I will press on and finish up talking about levels. So we also have an advanced training level, that's level 3. Modules at this level are 15 hours each. They're specifically designed for experienced transitional leaders who want to deepen their practice or develop a specialty. Each of these is going to consist of 5 to 6 sessions, 3 hours each, again, over 3 to a 6 week period. These will also be offered 2 to 3 times a year. Importantly, we only have one of those that we're going to offer in 2025. I'll talk about that in just a moment, name it and describe it. Importantly, these are modules that will require the pre-approval by the IMN Dean of Faculty, who is yours truly as Executive Director of IMN. And essentially we'll have a conversation about whether this is an appropriate training for you depending on your experience. Because again, we really intend this, the module we're going to offer in 2025, which I'll describe in a minute, and those at this level to be for those who have some experience with transitional leadership specifically, and enough training basis in order to really engage fully and completely. So what we're specifically talking about, for example, is Module 6, New Beginnings and Faithful Endings. We'll offer that this year. This is a focus specifically on the special transitional leadership required to help a congregation consider some really critical things, such as shared ministry or amalgamation of one form or another, or the possibility of disbanding or closure and becoming a legacy congregation. So let's see. This is a training that that we haven't posted yet in terms of the schedule. It is a training that you will be hearing more about in the coming weeks, and we look forward to sharing more about it with you soon. So I have concluded what I want to share with you around the modular structure of the IMN trainings, these different levels and what some of the modules involve. I'd like to tell you in a minute about what I can share with you about the training schedule. But before I do that, again, just want to make sure if there are any questions that you have at this point before I do that. Yes, Shannon.
I have been wondering about the move away from the field work. And I just wonder if you could mention, like, just talk a little bit about that.
Yes. Oh, thank you, Shannon. So when you say the move away from field work, one of the things you're identifying is that we're doing field work in a different way in this fundamentals of transitional leader training. So our field work was primarily designed as an add-on element to the FTMC sequence that included work that trainees did, sharing around what's happening in their settings in some specific ways. What this modular training is doing instead is integrating field work into the modules. So within the modules, there's specific kinds of field work. And let me talk about those, because this is a really critically important question, actually, that you've raised. You know, how are we engaging our trainees in reflection on practice? That's what field work is about. And so we're going to do those. We're going to do that in several ways. I'm going to name two of them. One of them is the development of and the increasing enrichment around participant setting descriptions. So we're going to begin with engaging participants in the description of a setting that they have in mind, a leadership setting in mind, talking about what they're seeing in that setting, where it's located, physically, what it is, as well as some of the dynamics of what's happening, including some of the, what are the obvious elements of change that are being experienced. We take that setting description and we put it alongside the specific learning, such as, for example, systems theory as a really core principle theory that we introduce. And we begin to ask questions of learners where we invite them to consider their setting description using this new lens. So using a systems theory lens, for example, what are you seeing as you think about the setting that you've described? And how would you enrich, deepen, layer that description that you started with? So the idea here, Sharon, is through each module, we're engaging participants around doing that. And then in each successive module, deepening and deepening and deepening as they go. So that's one example of field work within the training. Another good example would be inviting our participants to describe a particular leadership moment. So naming a moment that they have in mind that was significant to them for one reason or another, or that they wish they could get a better handle on, or could perhaps be able to address more significantly, and using that leadership moment at various points in the trainings to more deeply reflect on their posture and the practice of leadership. So we're trying to integrate a couple of things, the what we do and the how we do it, having people reflect on the lived experience that they have, and sharing that with others to gain broader perspective. So those are two examples of field work within the training. And I so thank you for lifting up this question, Shannon, because I think I kind of jumped over this piece, and it's an important piece. Is that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you for asking the question. Any other follow-up questions or comments? before I move on to talking about some really concrete, specific things like schedule. So someone has asked about how large the courses will be. So I think that specific question is how many can participate. We can have as many as 24 people. In general, we would not want to go beyond that because it's easier to keep that number of participants within the frame of Zoom. Zoom continues to be the specific way we gather people for class sessions. The class sessions are required. You have to go. This is not an asynchronous training. So participants are expected to come and be there present for the class. That happens in Zoom. I will also name the fact that we're using, as part of our online best practices, we'll be using a learning management system called LearnWorlds that helps us to create a learning environment in addition that supports the learning that's happening. I can talk more about that in a bit. So no more than 24. And I don't know if I have said this previously, but I'll say it now. Best practice for IMN is to have 2 trainers. So there'll always be at least 2 different instructors who are presenting material, 2 different voices that are carrying the material and engaging participants. That's a commitment that we have because we believe that is the most helpful to learners. So there was a specific question from Peggy about whether at the level 3 advanced courses will require level 1 or just IMN Dean approval. I'm going to say at this point, Peggy, that it's IMN Dean approval. I think it's unlikely that if someone hasn't had any transitional leader training at all, that it would be that those courses would be appropriate for them. But they could have had their transitional leader training with another training organization, perhaps, and that could be sufficient. Importantly, transitional leader experience is going to be one of the most important pieces. And so this is going to be a bit on a case-by-case basis. So Lucretia has a question about, in her faith tradition, the Episcopal Church, transitional interim ministers appears the normative model for transitional ministry than vocational interim ministers. So she was asking about level 3 training. Is that envisioned for either of both transitional and vocational interim ministry? I think, Lucretia, to really answer your question, I need to know a little bit more about how you're drawing that distinction between those 2 categories. Would you be willing to say a little bit?
Yeah, oftentimes interim ministers are a stepping stone for newly ordained heading towards like a rector position or assistant position. And that's the intention from the start, both of the judicatory and the minister. And I think a smaller percentage of us understand that our call is to interim ministry, and I count myself in that mix, that it's not transition from any type to another, but for me, this is my call.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to say that level 3 training, those advanced trainings, could be appropriate for either of those segments of transitional leaders within your denomination. I think it is the case that, I mean, if you put yourself in the vocational interim ministry category, that it is going to specifically be helpful to you. Because look, I mean, one of the key example I'm giving you here, the training we're going to be offering in 2025 on new beginnings and faithful endings is really a specialty, honestly. I will say, however, it's a specialty that more and more of us are finding is a much more common set of changes or situations that we have to respond to. So those of us who are called vocationally to this work and are embracing that vocation, I think are going to very much find those advanced trainings, including this one, as something that helps them have a richer vocational life and the ability to address those situations. I still think it could be helpful for others who don't think of themselves this way, but they may or may not choose that kind of training. So it might be one of the things that distinguishes between the former and the latter forms that you're naming. Okay. So thank you for that question. Grant, I know you have had your hand up. Thank you for your patience.
Well, I have a observation, and under the old plan, be 4 days in a week, all week, pretty much necessary to take vacation time for that intensive a class. And under this new system, I see you have it spread out enough that I don't think students will really need to take vacation time away from their churches. And I think this is a much better plan. So I just want to applaud you for that change.
Thank you, Grant. I so appreciate that. I want to say two things about this. One is the overwhelming response that we've had from our former participants when we talked about the training is the challenge of fitting all that time in together, taking time away from the rest of their work. And frequently, I will just say that especially in this post-pandemic period where we've been all online learners, even if it's intensive, are still trying to fit that intensive into the rest of their lives. And most of them are trying to do it. So that is not conducive to excellent learning. And so we tried to address the fact that we are going to be delivering these trainings primarily online. And in that situation, what makes for excellent learning are shorter amounts of time that people gather together for in-class work between those class sessions, and a little bit more time spreading out the sessions so that the learning can marinate a bit more. That's kind of my word for it. Giving time for the integration of the learning in the practice. That is harder to do when you are having the experience of kind of drinking from the fire hose, as we sometimes say. Lynn, did you have another question?
For these modules, for the essentials and the core, is there a time frame wherein I must complete that, or can I drag it out infinite? I'm just curious because we used to try to do it in a year, so I'm just kind of curious what the hope is going to be, recognizing that in the first year that may not pan out very well.
You've asked a very important question, and it goes to our understanding of kind of how we continue to stay committed to this kind of learning as individuals. And so we're going to encourage people to take those trainings as close together as possible, not to spread it out too far. Right now, we're not putting a limit on the time frame. But, in my mind, I'm thinking if you're at the pace of one training a year, that could be fine. If you're spreading it out beyond that, I think it becomes less and less effective because the focus is lost, right? So if I had to encourage people, I would encourage them to at least complete level 1, modules 1 to 3 within a year time frame. I think that's a good that would be a good recommendation. And if it's possible to do more than that, if it's possible to do all 5 of the modules, and it is scheduling wise possible, at least in theory, then we would of course encourage that. There's a registration deadline. It's an important thing to keep in mind. Registration deadlines, it's about 3 weeks before it starts, mainly because we are using the ESKI, that inventory, EQ inventory I mentioned before, and it takes some time to take the inventory and also to engage others who are going to be also involved in your inventory, providing their perspectives on your emotional intelligence through how they experience you specifically. So it takes a little bit of time to arrange that and to get that all ready to go. And we want participants to be ready when the first session starts. So we make sure we give them enough time to do that.
Well, great. Well, we appreciate the extra time that you all have given us to say more about the fundamentals of transitional leadership. I just really want to thank you for your time again and for your interest. And please do let me know. You can reach me directly. Always happy to hear from you. Always happy to respond. And I really thank my colleagues, Ellen and Crystal, for being on this call. They're also a wealth of information about not only our trainings, but also about IMN membership and its benefits. So we look forward to sharing that kind of thing with you as well. So thank you again, and blessings, and we look forward to hopefully to seeing you again soon. Take care now. Bye-bye.